Perez, Senior Democratic Service Officer.
Councillor Susan Woolwork, I'm here for Felon District Council.
No, Councillor Scott Warren representing Peterborough City Council.
Councillor Chris Wiggin representing Peterborough City Council.
Councillor Julie Kerr representing Huntingdonshire District Council.
Councillor Sarah Kane representing Cambridgeshire County Council.
Sorry, Elliot, could you just turn yours off again?
Councillor Christine Whelan, East Cambridgeshire District Council.
I'm Councillor Michael Jones, Cambridge City Council.
Yeah, I'm Jack Hudson, I'm the Commissioner's CEO and also Monitoring Officer.
And I'm Catherine Kimberley, Head of Engagement for the Commissioner.
Good afternoon everybody, Darryl Preston, Police and Crime Commissioner for Cambridgeshire and Peterborough.
Bill Trussell, CFO to the Commissioner.
Good afternoon everybody, nice to see you. Simon Magic's the Chief Constable.
Afternoon, John Lee, CFO to the Chief Constable.
Afternoon everyone, my name is Satinder Sahota, I'm the Director of Legal and Governance here at Peterborough City Council and Monitoring Officer.
Thank you very much. I'd just like to remind everybody present that the meeting is being live streamed on YouTube and we welcome anybody watching at home. Can I also please remind those present to ensure that all devices are set to silent or switched off wherever possible. We will start with the preliminary items for this afternoon with apologies for absence. Kizzy, do we have any apologies for absence?
Hi there, yes, we've got apology from Marcus Barnett.
Okay, thank you. And number 2, declaration of interest. Does any member have a declaration of interest to raise? If you could just raise your hand. No, lovely, thank you very much. Right, item 3, minutes of the previous meeting. You've all had an opportunity to read through those. I personally wasn't here at the last meeting, I was poorly, so are members in agreement that the minutes of the previous meeting are accurate? Thank you very much, we'll record those as accurate then. Thank you. Commissioner, you sometimes like to update us if there's anything that was arising from the minutes, and I don't know whether there's anything that you are in a position to share in relation to the national announcements from earlier this week.
Thank you, Chair. So as per usual, there were a couple of questions asked at the last panel meeting, which we took away. There was one from Councillor Leeming in relation to Operation Soteria. So this is serious sexual offences. There is, and I'll provide you, or my team will provide you with the link to this, but there is actually a data dashboard which will go some ways to help you. I think the question here was how can we compare to other areas and forces. My understanding is it doesn't actually do a comparison, but there is useful information in there and we'll give you that detail. And Councillor Tong, you asked about inflationary issues in relation to victim services. The figures is, back in 2021, our budget was around £1 million. With the inflation calculator has been out from the Bank of England. If that was adjusted, it would now be around 1.3 million. However, due to the really significant and great work of my team and partners at our local authorities, Cambridge City Council, all of your authorities, our current budget is around 2.2 million. Far in excess, and that is particularly in relation to support for victims of domestic abuse and sexual violence, which I think we're all really happy to support. Chair, those were the soft actions that I took away from the last meeting. Panel, you will be aware in the last few days, well, it was actually on Monday, we had an announcement from the government, fair to say we had plenty of leaks before it, in relation to the policing reform white paper. I have had several briefs on this, and I'm sure the Chief Constable has as well. The headlines of this, I'm sure you will all be aware, is the formation of a national police service. I think still yet to be defined what that will look like and what that will entail. Things like technology, procurement, serial and organised crime. I will give a view, I'm not so sure the Chief Constable will, but I will give a view as to what I think about that. I think there are some positives. I think the delivery of national specialist capabilities is a good thing, and I always have done. However, we need to see the detail here, because accountability for a national police service with more powers for the Home Secretary, I would need to look very carefully at the detail there as to, you know, what I wouldn't want to see is state-led policing. We have a system of policing in this country of policing by consent, and I think without the right accountability, that is at risk. Secondly, and possibly more significant to us here, is around police mergers. What it actually is an independent review, we're told. What that looks like, I don't know. Sorry, not an independent review, but a review of the current structures of forces. What has been mooted, both nationally in the papers, in the media, is potentially around 12 big forces. One could say that if you looked at the current policing structure, it's cut into regions anyway. Cambridge is part of the Eastern region. If you look at those regions, plus London, plus Wales, that equals 12. So, potentially, down the line, we would be in a police force area. So my opinion and my view on that is this. Show me the evidence base, and I can support it, because at the moment there isn't one to say that bigger is better. And in fact, I would argue or point to some evidence where bigger is certainly not better. That includes London, Birmingham, Manchester, who have all recently been in special measures and enjoy far lower confidence levels than we do here in Cambridgeshire. And by the way, we are #1 in the country at the moment for trust and confidence in policing, which I think we should be proud of collectively, because we're all part of that system. More to do. We need more trust and confidence, but I think that is a real risk on big forces. But having said that, we have to see the detail, and our sharp focus is doing the job that's in front of us and keeping the residents of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough safe. Amongst that white paper, there are a number of other announcements. Police and crime commissions being abolished, for one. What I would say is this: the reason given at the time for abolishing police and crime commissioners, and I do understand people have different views, but it was because, one, they were not very well known by the community. I'm not really sure that's the reason. I think it's what sort of job you're doing. But anyway, one of them was that. And there was a couple of other reasons given as well. I think we can now see one of the main reasons for abolishing PCCs is to allow for police mergers moving forward, because without that, obviously, that would be a little bit tricky. Lots of other stuff within the papers, within the paper, which I'm sure many of you have seen. There is in there a requirement for police officers to have a licence to practice. I don't agree with that personally. That's my personal view. I think that's another layer of bureaucracy and classroom time where I think we would want our police officers visible in our communities fighting crime. I think I will leave it there. There are a number of other proposals in there as well, and would be happy to take questions. I'm sure the Chief Constable would on that, but I will leave it there, Chair.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. And can see and feel that times are quite uncertain, and actually probably more important than ever that collectively we work together and remain strong and uphold our integrity collectively whilst all these other changes are going on. So I think from a panel perspective, we commit to continue to support both of you, the Force and the Commissioner's Office, until such time and through this time of uncertainty. Thank you very much for the updates. Right, we will move on now to the agenda item around the precept report. And just before we look at this, thoroughly. I think, Satinder, you're just going to remind panel members of what our role and responsibilities are this afternoon in relation to this specific item. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm grateful. And so, as the Chair has mentioned, I'd like to respectfully remind panel members of your statutory duties relative to agenda item 1 before you today. The panel will be reviewing the budget and precept proposed based on the priorities set out in the Police and Crime Plan. Although panels do not have a role in setting the budget, your scrutiny of the proposed precept, you will need awareness of the budget proposed and then make one of the following recommendations. Firstly, support the proposed precept without further comment, or support the proposed precept with recommendations, or finally, veto the proposed precept. And this requires a majority of at least 2/3 of present members. Thank you. I hope that's helpful. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Commissioner, I think you were going to start off with this report and then probably hand over to your finance colleagues.
Thank you, Chair. So there's two things I'd just like to point out. Within the paper, there is mention there that actually the final figures, hopefully, we would have received yesterday. Today, we have not. And I know you may be thinking then, well, without that detail, how can we make decisions? Okay, so that figure that we are using with the allocations that we're already aware from government is the maximum amount that we will get. The risk is any adjustment, we will be giving some back. And clearly the CFO can explain that in greater detail. So my point is this, the Chief Constable and the CFO need to move forward now. We're already nearly in the new financial year. I am requesting, and I will tell you why in a moment, the maximum precept that I can in order to have a balanced budget, in order that we don't lose police officers, in order that the Chief Constable has the resources that they do. So my view is, and I would hope that we can make a decision so that the constabulary can move on with keeping our communities safe. Panel, it's very rare, as you know, that I ask the Chief Constable or his team to attend these meetings. The reason for so doing, it's my statutory responsibility to provide the resources to the Chief Constable to run an effective and efficient police force for our area. So I thought it would be useful for the Chief Constable himself to come and tell you why he needs these resources and what they will be doing with them. The headline figure is this. If you agree to this rise in precept, the total funding for the constabulary will be around £220.5 million, so around 220 million crowns. That is an increase from government of around 10.7 million. Now, most of that, if not all of that, has actually already been accounted for by government decisions. So, for example, police pay rise, which I support, but these are decisions by government, so need funding by government. They are not fully funded by government, very rarely are, when you actually get down to the detail. Also, national insurance increases. We were probably fortunate that most other public sector in that most of it has been met by government, but not all. So these are amounts of money that has to be found elsewhere. The cost pressure, and the CFO can go into more detail, but the cost pressure was around £18 million in deficit without that additional 10. So doing the maths here, you know, we needed to, or the Chief Constable needed to make some significant savings, which has been done, around £6.5 million. And then there's a technical adjustment, which others can talk to as well. With that, we have a balanced budget, not but next year, but the year after. Panel, there are many police forces in this country in real significant financial crisis. We are not. And that, I believe, is to the due diligence of my office, the Chief Constable and the CFO. There are plenty of pressures, and it will get tough and it will get harder. But with this maximum increase that I can give, and by the way, all the government figures that you will see published make the assumption, little small print, but make the assumption that the Police and Crime Commissioner will raise to the maximum. As far as I am aware, every single Police and Crime Commissioner in the country is doing just that. We have no choice. It's that or you lose police officers, and I don't think that's what the public want. Before I hand over to the Chief Constable, we did a consultation. That is part of the statutory consultation. Catherine is here from my team. She can give some detail around that, possibly after the Chief Constable. I know what you'll be thinking, it's low numbers, and it is low numbers. It's basically the same as everywhere else in the country if you do the consultation like we did. And also I'm fully aware that it's not representative of our communities. I think the only way we could have done that is to spend a lot of money. The County Council, we know, has a survey which is done by consultancy, which is a lot of people, and quite interestingly brings back some interesting results. And I'll just point out one. So in our survey, if we ask people how safe they feel, I think, it's around 50% are saying they feel safe or very safe. The County Council survey, so this is not a police survey, but a County Council, you've got around 80% of people saying that they're safe or very safe. So I wonder sometimes also people responding to my survey, I am very, very grateful for, but I'm not quite sure that that accurately reflects. I speak to a lot of people, as I'm sure many of you as councillors do. I speak to a lot of people on the doorstep or just at parish council meetings or as part of my role, and I always talk about this in police funding, where I can, even to school children about police funding, not necessarily the most interesting subject for them. But my general sense is this, interestingly, and many of you will be from local councils or the county council, if we ask the public about bins and things, it's tough, it's tricky, isn't it, and libraries. Most people, they'll be supportive of paying more for policing as long as they get the service that they expect. And I think that's the caveat. So therefore, if I'm unable to raise this, then the Chief Constable will be unable to give the service that they expect. Chair, I will finish there, and if I may hand over to the Chief Constable.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Commissioner, and good afternoon. It's nice to see you all again. Thank you for the opportunity, actually, to come and talk to you. I think I'll start with a fairly blunt statement. This is fundamentally about balancing the books. As the Commissioner's quite rightly identified, if we don't, and it's not for me to make the case, clearly it's the Commissioner, but baked into my figures is the precept, and without it, I'd be staring down the barrel of another £6 million worth of savings. To put the constabulary into context, and I suspect you know this probably far better than I, not least because you represent your constituents. We are one of the lowest funded forces. I mean, that's a fact. In the paperwork it states, so the unit cost to us is low, but we also deal with, for all the right reasons, a hugely growing population. And the issue around population growth is the kind of lag that always brings to us. And again, we have a double impact here. The lowest unit costs and one of the highest growing counties has a double impact on my ability to deliver the kind of service that I want. More broadly, we are, as a service, continually faced with increasing pressures, whether that's kind of the demand, public expectation, cost pressures within the system, and I will mention towards the end of the time that I have, the impact of change. We've just mentioned, or the Commissioner, Chair, you just opened around, the changing landscape of policing. It's continuous. It's continuous. We're now overlaid with some national change that hopefully will bring, and I may get an opportunity to mention, some opportunities. But let's be clear here, change always comes with a cost. Whether that's just a cost of feeling unsettled, unfocused, but more specifically for this conversation, a cost in terms of how do you move from the current state to whatever the new state looks like. And I'm not sure where that kind of money's coming from. I just reiterate the Commissioner's point, though, that we are not sitting on our hands and just expecting handouts. I know that you would expect me to continually look at my business and as described, over £6 million, £6.3 million worth of savings have been made to help us balance the budgets going forward. That's not without its impact. That's not without its impact. And there are parts of my business, almost regardless, that are creaking. I, in fact, wrote to you, Chair, not too long ago around our firearms and explosive licensing department. And that's a prime example of where the business creaks, not least because I'm keen to ensure that our focus is very much on putting resources into the front line. Now, I would also argue that actually firearms and explosive licences is the front line, certainly if you're waiting for your licence to be renewed. But what I think I'm trying to be is honest and open, that even with the precept that the Commissioner's making a case for, we are still creaking. I suspect we're not alone in the public service, but I care more about my service and trying to ensure that we deliver policing to keep people safe in this county. We work very diligently and very hard with our collaborative partners, not least, as part of that collaboration and part of the savings profile, we've saved over 23 million over the last 5 years because we need to make sure that we keep reshaping the budget. And for me, I need to reiterate the uncertainty that's ahead of us, be it statutory through white papers, general issues at a national or in fact at an international level that policing has to respond to. So I suppose, if I may, so why do I need, so the Commissioner kind of left it with asking me to set out why I need or want this money. Well, I think the first thing, and the Commissioner's already stolen the line, or at least used the line, it's about maintaining officer numbers. I'm going to steal one of the Commissioner's lines now. You will see across the country that colleagues in similar situations to me will be coming to ask for more money from their panels, and at the same time, reducing the numbers of police officers' headcount. Now, I don't want to do that. I want to work with our communities to ensure that I've got the right capability onto the streets. And it's worth noting, actually, that as a consequence of the point being made earlier, that when you compare the national growth numbers of police officers in Cambridgeshire, it far outstrips the national average. We've done very well. I also want to respond to the challenge that's been set around the neighbourhood policing guarantee. The Home Secretary wrote to the Commissioner and I only a matter of days ago, just over a week or so ago, setting out the expectation that the Home Office are expecting an additional 18 people, and I use the word people rather than officers or staff, but 18 additional people into our neighbourhoods. Now that comes with some funding, and in the letter, quite properly, it says we want 18, and then it gives us a number in terms of the funding that comes with that. Unfortunately, that's less than half of the cost, and that cost is assuming that it's the bottom end of pay scales as opposed to top ends of pay scales. The top ends of pay scales, it's near a third. Of course, we know, and again, I think it's been mentioned before, that the benefit of policing in the UK is our interactions with, and I hope closeness with our communities, which is led predominantly, not solely, but led predominantly through a strong neighbourhood commitment. I want to do that. So whether it's the government kind of suggesting, giving me a poke or a push, or whether it's my leadership or my position and my focus, I want us to be as visible as we can be in our public space. That said, I caveat that with the complexity, the demands, the need to draw people back into the police stations for a whole range of other reasons, which takes me quite nicely on to why I also want to look at spending money using tech more effectively. I want to get more from my units. Let's call them units at this stage because it's officer staff, or actually some processes in my system. So I want to not be left behind. I want to ensure that we, using public money as effectively as we can, using the funds that I've got to become effectively an accelerator to more effective policing, greater productivity. And that's, in my view, getting more from each individual, i.e. making sure they've got the right technologies to make the right decisions and be more often in the public space than being dragged back to our police stations. And that's also an investment in making sure that we as an organisation are fit for those sorts of changes. We see and talk about whether it's that kind of fairly broad concept called artificial intelligence, but it's more than that for me. It's about getting our data, getting our information in the hands of the right people to make the right decisions, making sure I get greater insight from the data that I have to help us shape and frame the delivery of our business. So it's something about making sure we deliver better tech. And it's not just about frontline. We've got systems and processes behind those supporting those that deliver policing that could be and ought to be more efficient. But that comes with we need to get over the bridge to get into that new world. And for me, that's around better organisational change, more sustained change. And then finally, and my final point around why do I need this money is effectively to allow me to adequately prepare for and respond to the many, and I say carefully, ill-defined challenges ahead. We've talked at length about the white paper. I know that as part of that white paper that we will get changes to the strategic policing requirement. It will be moved, it'll change, it'll morph into something else. But broadly around that white paper expectations, and as the Commissioner has quite rightly said, there are some real opportunities here, but again come with cost. There's some challenges here, not least because it's yet to be defined. But that's an obvious one. But there are also other challenges that I have ahead of me. I'm sure some of you are aware of the independent sentencing review and what that will potentially mean for our communities and how my service, step into the community to ensure that those individuals that under the current regime would be being given custodial sentences and some respite to our communities will not be, and they'll be managed in the community. And I know, not least because of the very can-do, active approach that policing takes to every challenge that it's faced with, that we will undoubtedly be asked to shoulder and burden, or share some of that burden of change, which I think is going to have, actually in the shorter term, probably more of an impact, more of a visible and tangible impact than probably the white paper. But I give you those two as examples, but there will be a whole range of other things, whether I could talk about the green agenda, could I talk about electrification, could I talk about my estates, I can talk about all of those things that unfortunately come with a cost. I'll probably pause there, Chair, I'll pause there, Commissioner, but of course I am willing to take questions.
Thank you very much. Does anybody have a question at this point? Right, Councillor Tongue? Yeah.
Good afternoon. Firstly, can I thank everyone involved for this report. It's incredibly interesting and useful. And I think it is very important to acknowledge the difficult times that, well, all authorities across the country have fallen into when it comes to funding. I really appreciate Officer Medgick's. Is it Medgick's how it's pronounced? Medgick, thank you. I really appreciate your acknowledgement we've fallen short when it comes to handling firearms licences. That was obviously quite a big story recently. And it's something I myself am quite worried about. Because although it's definitely important that we have officers on the street addressing crime directly, I think it's also important that we nip potential sources of crime in the bud. Firearms obviously aren't a bad thing. They're a tool, they can be used in any way, and so many people use them responsibly, and that's completely fine. However, there is the issue that certain people aren't responsible enough to own a firearm. It is a privilege that we give people that we trust in. I will say, just as a bit of a note, I don't think it's a smart decision to have the police be a licensing body. However, here we are. It's an awkward situation we've fallen into. So I will say personally I'd prefer that police didn't have to waste their time on licensing, but given that it is your job, it's something we do need to think about. So the two very big things that were highlighted as criticism in the recent report were firstly a lack of home visits. Obviously, you have a lot of people who are trying to be responsible owners, and they're quite well-meaning people, who are making mistakes, and that needs to be checked on. And again, you can be as well-meaning as you like. If you're not responsible enough to own a firearm, you shouldn't be owning a firearm. But there's also the more serious, in my view, fear about the lack of a working procedure to revoke licences, which obviously needs to be done. If someone isn't responsible enough and is acting dangerously, they shouldn't own a firearm. And especially because we're in increasingly divided times and increasingly tense times, I think it's more important than ever to try and address this issue. So I was wondering if you could explain how the proposed medium-term financial strategy goes about addressing this problem, because I think it is a problem a lot of people care about.
Councillor. Certainly, I think the first point to you, how does this financial strategy read along people, because that's where the resource, the bulk of my resource goes into. So in response directly to your question, I happen to have started my tenure at the end of September, as you recall when we first met. In the time prior to the HMI inspection, I'd already increased during my tenure and a little before resources into that department by 9. We have subsequently and will increase by another 13. It is something about having the right numbers of people, and it comes back to the point I raised when I spoke about the necessity for the precept. Because we have to continually look at and balance, we end up with, and also, not least because of the pressure, quite rightly, the public's expectations of us to respond to some serious risks in society, be it calls for service, getting to jobs, responding to crime. In fact, we have to balance that against a risk profile. And I take your point around the privilege. So, and I also welcome the changes in the amount we can charge for licences. To your point, we've been running at a deficit, or the service has been running at a deficit around firearms licences for some significant time. This hasn't just happened overnight. This has been a kind of a growing issue, and I know the Commissioner has been active in the accountability space around certainly holding me to account. I can certainly testify to the flames that my feet are being held to in and around this, and I'm sure that would have been in predecessor's time. But it has to be taken in the round. So to your specific question, the answer at the moment is around resources. Now, in the longer term, I think we will need to look at, again, my point around technological investment, because a lot of what we do is draw back lots of data, and our ability then to handle big sets of data effectively and quickly will be aided with better technologies. I think where do I get my comfort? I get my comfort from the grip that's now being applied, from the leadership that we've now put in. I happen to have put in an extra superintendent, so quite a significantly senior colleague, to allow better decision making, better risk assessments, and we've done a fundamental root and branch review of process and policy, and using the technologies we have. They're not the best, but to build some better ability to look at data, which allows us, to your point around managing risk, we are now able to look at risk profile in a slightly different way and respond to that. So it is all part of the same, it is all part of the request, but I've not couched it in specific terms. My kind of report to you is in those general terms, of which people and technology are absolutely key.
Llewellyn and Councillor Leamy.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. Just on the basis of it was mentioned about increasing population and police operations and things. Ely Police Station has been closed for quite a long time. Basically the population is increasing dramatically, with 1,600 new homes being planned for that area. I know the new police station is being built in Milton, but there's nothing really north of that area. So that covers like Milton, Histon, and all of that part of Cambridge. But to the north, there's not a police station there, and that's something that's been coming up quite a lot from the public. The fact that that police station has been closed and there is no actual person there you can go and speak to. What are your thoughts on that, please? appreciate the online sort of facilities, and that's obviously made a lot of difference. But there are many people who are what I would call in poverty, and in fact not in actual poor, like wealth poverty, but actually not being able to use the internet or even know how to use the internet. And I think that needs to be addressed as well, because these people are vulnerable, and that does need to be looked at seriously.
Thank you. Councillor Leeming.
Thank you, Chair. I have 4 questions. I'm happy to wait my turn.
Maybe just do them one at a time. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. So my first question is about the situation. Actually, first of all, I should say thank you to everyone who's worked on this paper, and it's very nice to see you guys joining us. So yeah, I would like to offer my sympathy that you've been put in this difficult position with missing information in the budget. I'm sorry if that's the situation you found yourself in. For our benefit as a panel, I appreciate that you've put the precept at the maximum, and that is a decision that wouldn't change. But what is the amount that is at risk with the potential changes that could come back from the national government? So what is the amount, the financial amount that we could potentially miss out on? What is your plan B to cover that gap, if that situation did happen? And what are the consequences of that plan B having to be used? Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Good question. So, what hopefully you've picked up from the paper is how high level the settlement and information that we have got has been. And effectively, what's happened is the Home Office have rolled all of the previous ring fence and specific grants we've got into a single number. One of those was to do with the additional officer uplift grant in terms of going beyond the targeted uplift baseline. So ours was 206 in Cambridgeshire. The decision we took at the time, because similar to the neighbourhood policing guarantee funding that the Chief has outlined, we weren't convinced about the sustainability of that funding arrangement. So what seems to have happened in the papers and the settlement and info that we've got at the moment is that there's £106 million nationally that's been rolled up. We weren't in receipt of a specific grant in respect of that additional officer uplift. However, within the information that's come out, we've got £1.1 million of funding related to that because it's gone through the funding formula. So effectively every other force in the country is in the opposite position, where they did have grant and they're probably receiving a bit less than what they were receiving in 25-26. So the risk we see or perceive is that we could, in the final settlement, see a reversal of that in terms of that still being pulled out as a specific grant, which means £1.1 million of that, our total funding, would fall away. In terms of the mitigations, we would need to go back and look at various things around capital financing arrangements. So we have got revenue contributions to capital. They would be relatively easy at this stage of the year to pull out. We wouldn't therefore then need to go to police staff savings. There is clearly the opportunity to look at officer numbers if that was the situation, because the government have released the conditions around maintaining the officer baseline. But I think we would obviously look at other options first. The impact of the capital financing and revenue contributions, we then need to borrow more, which then brings with it a financing cost as well. So it becomes a little bit circular, which is why we need to take that away and probably look at how best to mitigate that reduction in funding if it was to materialise.
So to be clear, there's up to 1.1 million in question, depending on what information they eventually give you. Your main plan to cover that is to do with financial remodelling with your debt repayment. Is that correct? I'm just trying to understand that.
So within the budget, what we've got, and it's in Appendix B, there is a line that's revenue contributions to capital.
Right.
So it's £2.5 million that we're applying to fund capital from the revenue budget, because we don't get any capital grant. So effectively what we'd be saying is that we would reduce
Got
that
that.
2.5 million
Yeah.
to
So you'd reduce paying back your capital debt?
well, no, this is funding new capital investment.
Oh,
It's
okay.
It's not related to debt. The
Just new
consequence
stuff.
would be if we would have to borrow £1 million more unless we reduce our capital programme.
Right.
Okay.
I think so.
Good.
Would there be any potential, because you mentioned potential reduction of officers, so that would be an operational impact?
It would be one of the last things I want to do.
Yeah.
Because, you know, we have to balance our books fundamentally. I can't not have a balanced budget. We would look at everything else. That said, if we had to balance the books and there was nothing else that was left in the system, then I might have to taper down officer numbers. That's not where I want to be. So we would, and to your point around plan B. Well, of course, we're not really at plan B. We're probably already at plan D or E, not least because of the consequence of having to go through a eye-watering savings programme already, which comes back to the earlier question around where do we take this money out of our system? And in parts, you could potentially suggest we've over-approved, and therefore we have some of the problems that we have as described earlier. So not something I want to do, but I feel that it would be inappropriate to say it wouldn't be. I can't guarantee that we wouldn't. But that said, I'm not in that space at all. It's not what I want to do.
That's very fair, thank you.
Thank you. So, based on that, I know we haven't got to the point of speaking about approving budgets and that. I think my instinct is that I would like to approve the precept, but with the requirement as a panel we get a report on what is actually happening with this missing 1.1 million, and what actions that would be. Because I kind of feel that it could be potentially significant. I'm not sure what other panel members think, but that's my comment on that one. My second question is, Chief Constable, when you spoke, you talked about areas of your budget that were creaking, or areas that in your view, this might be to do with you spoke about earlier. So I noticed in the report, for instance, it said that only 7% of our capital estate has been built after the last 20 years or something. In your view, which of these areas in the budget as it stands is the most concerning when you think about thinking? What are the concerns, please?
Well, I think I referenced particular function around FRI and exposed costs, and so I think there's potential indicative some of those functions that sit one or two steps behind quite properly. As people that represent others in the community, our community potentially want to see police officers, and as a consequence, up until this year where we're coming into the new financial year, my budget, or the budget that we've been set, has been fixed against our uplift numbers, so our increased police officers. So if you don't have a police officer, you don't get the money. And if you get to a certain threshold, you lose all of the money, regardless of how it goes. So there's been a real pressure for all sorts of, you can understand, I genuinely understand why. But when I come to talk about the 23 million, 22.5 million pounds that have been saved in 2021, that act continually falls into those functions that are potentially populated by members of police staff. And look for efficiencies continually. There's a practical issue here. You can't continually, without the proper investment in technologies and process change that we struggle to make, not least about the point made around our lack of capital budget. So capital comes from revenue, so it becomes very, very circular. So you've identified the quality of some of the buildings. Now, of course, that point I made earlier, that I like new buildings. I think we're very lucky in Cambridgeshire that we're on across the road being in the building in Milton. But that's unusual. We kind of make do and mend and patch. And again, when you look at the working environments that I want to deliver for the officers and staff, am I proud of my estate? Probably not. I kind of alluded to some of the pressures that have been brought to bear around green agenda, all the right reasons for which I am absolutely committed. But that talks about big changes, and I've also referenced the need for technologies that aren't out of date. You know, I want to be far closer, not necessarily at, but far closer to the cutting edge.
Thank you. Thank you for that update. I imagine that criminals will do their best to be cutting edge. Thank you for that answer. I'll ask my other questions later.
Okay.
Thank you. Let other people have a chance to speak.
Thank you. Councillor Warwick, thank you for your patience.
Is lovely, thank you. So first of all, the fact that you were ranked highest in confidence, police confidence, I think is outstanding, and something like that needs to be really noted. And yeah, it's absolutely brilliant. And I have a real soft spot for the police. I think they're amazing, and my day-to-day job means that I come into contact with them a lot, and I can see the completely and utterly hard work they have to do, but also the behind the scenes. So they're not always the 999 people that turn up, they're the ones that are dealing with the mental health crises and all the other things. So that is absolutely amazing. So thank you for that. And like I said, I'd like it to be noted. Considering that we are underfunded compared to other areas and our population is growing exponentially, and what are we doing about that in terms of, are we raising this with the Home Office? Because it is just simply unacceptable for us to constantly keep taking out of the working man's pocket, and woman, don't all come at me, the working person's pocket, and they keep constantly paying for the same thing. Now, I will support this precept raise because the police are vital, simple as. And I can see that you're doing a hard job, and I can see that nobody's wasting money. But it just seems that we can't keep going after the same people for the same money. So, what is going on about that, please?
I think Jared might like to come out on that.
Yeah. Since starting this job, you know, this has been one of my primary focuses, and not just me, other police and crime commissioners in a similar position, and it does tend to be similar sort of areas who have that precept versus grant sort of mix, and a number of other factors as well. I have lobbied at every single possible occasion. Whenever the Home Secretary or Policing Minister's been in the room, that's been my question. Really disappointed that the last government committed to looking at the funding formula. That work was done. It's set with number 10 for political reasons, and it actually hurt them more than anyone else politically, but for political reasons they didn't go through with it, which I think was very disappointing. Interestingly, lobbying the new government, we basically faced the same problem, that there didn't seem to be much will. There's going to be winners and losers. That's the issue. And I don't need to tell you who the winners and losers would be. I mean, if we're lowest funded, the highest funded is London. Is this government going to take money away from London? Was the last government? No, they're not. The reality is that politically. But there may be some good news, and I'm going to claim all the credit, along with you good people. That was actually, as part of the white paper, a review of the funding formula is mentioned. Now, we're not quite sure when, how, or what. I've been briefed that they will do it, and they will do it now for the current model. But I think we're hearing different things at the moment, but we need to be very alive to that. I will be writing again, and hopefully the panel here will support me on that. And there are, you know, that political lobbying as well. We're all different coloured parties here as well. You know, let's lobby that. This is about our residents of Cambridgeshire. This isn't about equal funding. It's about fairer funding. I don't expect to get the same as London, Birmingham, Manchester. They have more problems. You know, we have a safe county, generally speaking, but crime is changing. And the Chief Constable here, you know, will struggle with that. You know, cybercrime, new kind of technologies, and of course that sharp focus that Chief Constable mentioned earlier. Slightly worrying, but the government are changing the strategic policing requirement to strategic policing priorities that police forces must do. That worries me. If you get a bit of a rogue Home Secretary in, that becomes a bit like state policing. But back to your point, I will continue to right? And perhaps once again, I think we might have done it before, Chair, but I mean, if this panel is supportive, we'll do another joint letter whilst the iron's hot.
3 times, I think, in my 8 years on the panel. I've put my name on the letter that says, come on guys, this isn't fair. So there is a lot going on in the background. Thank you. Councillor Warren.
Thank you for that report, Commissioner and the members. I've got 2 questions. My first question is about the savings and efficiency. You state on here you're achieving or looking at doing £6.3 million of savings and efficiency. How much is that going to be achievable? Is that going to be achievable, and how much of that is aspirational?
Thank you for the question. My expectation is it's all achievable because it's gone through a fairly rigorous governance process where we've had the opportunity to both check against check against what we are trying to achieve and check against its deliverability. And without it, it's going to be pretty hard. So it's not one of those on the kind of nice to do list. We've gone through an exercise and we could or we couldn't. It has to be delivered to come back to the opening points made to balance our books. It's not easy. Every time we go through a saving cycle, in fact, almost all of the low-hanging fruit, if there ever was any, has been gone. So it's all tough decisions. Sometimes we kind of get it absolutely right and we think that, there's an efficiency there, we should have probably taken it, or we are taking it. Sometimes we probably cut a little bit too much into the bone, which is part of the discussion before. But my expectation is that those efficiency savings will be made.
I think the only addition I'd make to what the Chief's outlined there is we're delivering on those savings for 26-27 now. So one thing I will consistently press with obviously my peers and colleagues is that early delivery, because we don't want attrition in savings proposals going into 26-27. So that's just in force as well as in the collaborative space. And I was just in meetings this morning about just giving us updates in terms of how those savings are progressing for delivery as much as possible by the 31st of March. So we're very focused on that because we're acutely aware that just stores up problems for us, if not in year.
And then my second question is on the capitals and states. You said on the bottom of the paragraph, you said there's risks around interest rates. What level of risks are there, and could you rate that in a RAG rating to the risks around interest rates to your proposed savings or your precept?
I'll kick off, Phil, whether you might want to comment on this. Clearly we're at the mercy of the market, so we're the same as local authorities. We borrow predominantly from the Public Works Loan Board, so they don't move directly with interest, but obviously interest drive gilt rates and that sort of thing, so it gets quite complicated. But in terms of the quantification of that, we probably haven't model different scenarios of interest rates. What we are forecasting, and it probably links into the treasury management strategy and the borrowing strategy that we've got. So whilst we've seen rates at higher levels and elevated, what we're doing is borrowing short term in the hope that the economy will recover and rates will fall, and the rates that we can borrow money will ultimately fall. And at that point, we'll be able to then refinance on a longer term basis, which is then more prudent in the overall budget and financing costs that we need to incur through the budget. So maybe a slightly more indirect response to your question, because it's kind of a little bit difficult in terms of, well, where would those interest rates land? But we are planning and looking at that constantly, sort of on a certainly quarterly basis through our treasury management processes in the way that your local authorities would be doing as well.
I mean, obviously, it's a two-sided coin on this one, because the higher interest rates are, the more we earn on our deposits, but the more we pay on our borrowing, and obviously vice versa. So, yeah, as John said, it's all managed through our treasury management strategy and the treasury team. We're looking for a short term to not lock ourselves into high rates. We're seeing rates are looking like they're going to be dropping a little bit further, and have dropped. Certainly, borrowing rates are looking lower. So it is a balancing act, and at the end of the day, we're not traders. We're not looking to play the market. We are looking for certainty to understand what our costs are, the income is, and what the costs are going to be.
Okay, does anybody have any further questions? Councillor Ling.
Thank you, Chair. So my third question was to do with the independent sentencing review. In the report, it refers to £500,000 being allocated to this. Is that money that's come from national government, or is that something that you found internally within your own budgets? And my question is, do you think that that's adequate? Will the national government give money to police forces and or the probation service to make this possible? I just wanted to push a little bit further into that £500,000, please.
Is that on?
Yes.
To your first question, the money is internal, so it's to be found. To the wider point around the independent sentencing review, I think there is still some uncertainty. I think the service more generally sees some pressure coming down the tracks. I think you can understand quite properly where the instigation of the sentencing review came from and the arguments that are being made. However, and having had the opportunity to speak at quite high levels in government, my concern is that the pressure will be borne into policing. Not solely, in fact, the argument in the paper, in the report itself, talks about probation taking the burden, but from memory, I think they've got to increase their workforce by 3,500, which is the modelling relative to this particular scheme, and I'm led to believe they're about 1,500 short on their current establishment. As I say, the way that we position ourselves at policing, we are here for our public. So if the public are likely to be harmed or we need to step in, we will. The reason I raise it in my kind of final paragraph about being adequately prepared for and responding to these challenges, I do see that as a kind of a significant challenge ahead of us. Now, some of that might smooth out and things might change in slightly different ways, but I do think we need to be alive to that particular fact. But to your question, it's an internal money setting us up. There'll be some structural changes for us as well, potentially, to respond to.
So the £500,000, what sort of things are you planning to use it on? What are the sort of early measures that you're making, given there's an element of uncertainty about how it will go in the future?
So it's very much around making sure that that money is being spent in terms of we've got the right people in the right places to respond. We already, as some of you will know, we already support individuals in the community through an integrated offender management program. We also manage a number of more serious, the wrong term, but individuals, sex offenders and dangerous people in our communities. We already do that. We already have responsibilities. The sorts of people that the independent sentencing review are talking about are those that potentially commit high levels of crime but at low levels of harm. Now, again, I use my language really carefully here, because any harm to any person is quite subjective. It'll be that cohort of individuals, and we will need to ensure that I've got a response, both in partnership with probation and others, but enough resource to both map, track, risk assess, and then respond to those individuals in the community, particularly if they're starting to continue committing crimes. So how do we revoke their and how quickly can we do so? So it's investing in that sort of environment to ensure that we can respond quickly to protect the wider community.
So based on what you said, do you think community safety partnerships will also see an increase in work?
Well, it's a broader conversation, because I think it sits across the wider criminal justice process rather than just the CSPs. And again, I know that the Commissioner and I have discussed this, and I know that where the Commissioner sees the need to have that debate at that sort of level, because I do think, as always, our most effective response is a response in partnership with those that have the different skill sets to help support. So I do think there will be pressure in the system, but potentially it will relieve pressure somewhere else, i.e. the prisons, of course. And that it is a system. When it works well, it is a system. Whether the criminal justice system always works well, we could probably debate, but I think it's at that system level.
Thank you. My final question is financial again. So within your papers, there's the MTFS, the Midterm Financial Strategy, which runs into 29-30. Based on what's happened in the last week, the white paper, the MPS announcements, first of all, with the white paper, I wasn't even sure when they're thinking of introducing these things. When you read the text, it talks about the changes to the Police and Crime Commissioner role, which is 2028, but it's not really clear when they're thinking about making this MPS. Well, I couldn't see it. Perhaps you've been briefed on that. But my point is the back end of the financial strategy is now rather hazy, shall I say, because of this potential change in the future. Do you think that any of that impact, that change, that sort of hazy fuzziness in the back end of the financial strategy, could that potentially have any more short-term impacts on, because it's a 5-year plan, so if something's going odd at year 4 and 5, does it have any impact on year 1, 2 and 3?
I'll hand over to colleagues in a moment, but a lot of it, the detail we're yet to see. Certainly the briefings I've had is that they'll be looking at forced mergers 2028, or if not sooner. Bear in mind when PCCs have been abolished. And some of the other things around the National Police Service as well, that's tiered. The reality is, I think we're looking many years ahead. And I'm being told, we're talking about potentially 2035 before some of these are introduced. Now, the reason I say that, because you're asking, what impact? We have no idea. And I have no idea whether any of this is going to happen. Because in 2028, 29, there's going to be a general election or before. We've already seen some political commentary around this, that I will do away with this and I'll do away with that. So to be fair to my colleagues, I mean, they can only work on what they know now, and we know very little now. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I think it's a good question, and it's tricky because it's anything that we probably say is opinion at the moment, because the level of detail isn't there. There's a direction of travel in my opinion. I'm sure the Chief will say a few words in it. But you're right, in terms of the plan, the document that you've got now, regardless of the white paper and the reforms that have been announced, the further out you go, that 4 years, it becomes more hazy because we're less certain about the assumptions we're making. So regardless of whether the white paper is happening or not, we would still, the plan as we present today in 2029-30 won't be the budget that we're setting. It is based on what we know here and today. So I think that's just probably part and parcel of setting a 4-year financial plan. I think that my view would probably be there are some elements that will move quicker on the National Policing Service, so the central National Policing Headquarters. So when you think about the helicopter service that is national, that could probably quite easily be picked up and brought into a national HQ. We would see we all pay for that. Every single force across the country pays into that. So we could see a top slice of our budget in order to transfer the funding across. So there might be elements like that may start to happen sooner. But I think like the Commissioner says, it's whether it is going to happen, what sort of time frames is really unclear.
May I just add a final point? I think it would be wrong for us to assume that the white paper will all come together at a single kind of convergent point. I think the point being made here across a range of different things will be moving at different time scales. And that potentially gives us both opportunities and challenges. So some of the costs that we put into some of these slightly peculiar setups, the example that we've just shared is the National Police Air Service, is run out of West Yorkshire. So that doesn't make massive amounts of sense. And so I do think there are some opportunities. I suppose my closing points on the white paper are that we need the detail, but it's not, and of course most of us will be focusing on the kind of coming together of force sizes and whatever else, which I think is an interesting point, but there will be other things that will emerge at different points relative to during this government and then into the next, and we need to ensure that we are seizing opportunities as well as seeing this as a challenge.
And actually one of the key challenges for you is keeping the show on the road and everybody as calm as possible and focused on the challenges at hand. You know, whatever's going to come is going to come, but actually there's part of that as an impact here and now, isn't it, that people are now facing quite significant uncertainty. Of course, sir.
Well, just to give you some reassurance, and it was only yesterday, it was making a similar point, which is for the officers and staff that are delivering policing in Cambridgeshire, this is business as usual. You know, we cannot allow others, I suppose me and some others in this room, will now be spending some of our thinking time preparing ourselves. But let me give you some reassurance. And as I say, I need making the point yesterday that we still need to be picking up our calls, we still need to be responding, we still need to be visible, we still need to be investigating crime, we still need to be arresting people, we still need to be updating victims and witnesses. These are things that we should be doing every day. So, of course, people will start to think and talking, but the direction of the force hasn't changed.
Thank you. Councillor William.
Thank you, Chair. Just to follow on from that point, I wanted to ask if there are any plans to introduce any sort of contingency reserves for reorganisation. Our experience for local government reorganisation is that the government said, this is what we're doing to you, fund it yourself. So I wouldn't be surprised if any forced mergers or anything like that ended up having the same kind of situation occurring.
I'll hand over to the accountants, but I'm afraid the budget is what it is. If government do not fund us, then this is going to be losing police officers. 80% of the budget is on people, and that's where you save it. That would be my. I'm getting nods there, so I think that's the reality of it. Any change will need to be funded. I'm not making a political point, and I'm not even saying we've had it with various governments. We quite often hear about political decisions being made at Westminster and that it's funded, when the reality is on the ground, and I'm sure you get it with the councils as well, it's not. It's just not fully funded. None of it's been fully funded. So no, there's no money left.
Yeah, thank you for that answer. As a council will made some of the points I wanted to make about the funding formula as well, and I thank you for your answers on that. Very clear. I think it would be helpful to, as a panel, to support the Commissioner in making sure we get the funding formula updated. I wonder if it's worth as well, Chair, including a recommendation to ensure that any changes do get funding from the government to support the force given the tight financial situations.
Yeah, I think from memory what happened last time was you drafted a letter and we supported that, and we did a joint one, and certainly very, very happy to do that again. Councillor Todd Jones.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And just following on those points, and it's a general view, really, I do hope genuinely we are pushing at an open door as far as the government's concerned in terms of pushing for that fairer funding formula. Because the government clearly has a massive focus on Cambridgeshire, the kind of sub-region, the growth company, the massively increasing population, a lot of infrastructure projects, and obviously fairer funding for resources, including policing, has to accompany that. So I generally hope we are all pushing an open door in that respect. I do have a specific question, something I've raised before at these panel meetings, and that relates to 6.1.10 in the report, and that's the this A and B, but A in particular, the commitment to digital innovation to modernise working practices of the constabulary. And I'm aware you have tripartite working, for example, with Bedfordshire and Hertfordshire. And I just wonder, in terms of the issues which I've raised before, in terms of efficient police services talking to each other in a technical way, and that data systems do actually talk to each other. The example I've given before of crimes that might be committed in the north of the region and criminals going into Lincolnshire, for example, and then police systems not being able to match up with each other and talk to each other. I hope that kind of, I don't know, it's great that the Chief Constable is here perhaps to ask this question directly, but I do hope there's a commitment to that kind of technological innovation that will really help efficient policing. And I hope that's really going to be a commitment to make sure all of the surrounding police forces talk to each other in these sort of circumstances.
Okay, if I can answer that in two parts. I think we are fortunate in the eastern region, and I'm conscious that you talked about Lincolnshire, but in the eastern region, some of our core systems are common, and therefore, if you raise a crime, it's visible and therefore open to the region, accepting that Lincolnshire is not part of that. However, within the white paper, and it's something that the service have been really heavily pushing for in terms of support to, and of course technologies continually evolve and grow, and it's about making sure that we have the infrastructure, the connecting infrastructure that lets us do that. To give you some reassurance, we have the Police National Database, which is effectively a huge database that sucks up information from across the country that allows then all of us to search, but it's not the same systems. So we operate on slightly different systems. Now, as somebody that leads some of the national work and technologies around public contact, I think there's a balance to be struck here. We need to have common standards, we need to have common data standards and common interoperability. But one of the concerns that I have, and we're probably now meandering off a little, is we need a very active market into which we can procure. Because if you start ending up with single suppliers because we go out as one, then you effectively potentially compromise the market. And I want a very vibrant market so we get absolute value for money, public money, when we're spending and when we're going out and spending lots of money. I think that's where we are, but the white paper does give us, to my point earlier around white paper and opportunities, that's one of the opportunities that the white paper talks of.
Okay, anybody else have any other questions? No? Okay, what we'll do then is the recommendations are contained within the report. So what I'm going to ask you to do, please, for the minutes and for the record is I'm going to ask for a show of hands, those who are for the proposals, who support the proposals, those who are against, and those that wish to abstain. So if we start with, can I have a show of hands, please, of those members who are comfortable to support the proposals within the paper? So, let me do the counting first. Oh, sorry, I forgot. All right, okay. Although there's enough people for... Well, do you want me to wait and do that again when he comes back? Would you like to ask your question now, Councillor Leeming?
Please. So in my head, I'm just thinking there are two things happening here. One is agreeing the precept and the other is understanding the budget. And they're actually two separate things. I'm quite happy to support the precept. I don't think there's any choice about that. That's the end of it. But because there's unknowns, which is not the fault of this team, I would like to know more about the budget before I say yes to that. And I'm not sure what opportunity we will have to look at the choices that potentially have to be made about this 1.1 million saving. I feel slightly like buying a pig in a poke about that.
Okay, just... Have everybody back in the room. What I'm going to ask you to do then is for a show of hands, those that are in favour of supporting the precept proposal, those that are against that, and anybody that wishes to abstain. So we're going to start with 4. Can I have a show of hands, please? Those people that are prepared to support the precept.
I think we're going to go unanimous. Okay, thank you very much. So nobody for, nobody against, and nobody abstaining. And I'm hoping that you take from that, with that, our thanks for the work collectively you have done together, the Commissioner's Office and all the staff in the Constabulary. You take our continued thanks to the Constabulary Chief. Back to you, ladies and gentlemen. Our thanks for the sterling work that they do. And if there's anything else that we can do to support in a time of uncertainty, will you please let us know? I will very happily come and talk or listen if that would ever be of any benefit. But you're ensured of our continued support. Thank you very much. Our second agenda item is just the forward planning. I think, Jack, you normally stay for that, but everybody else would probably like to get out of this really hot and stuffy room. Particularly you, sir. I'm thinking of you in your wool #1 suit.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Just to confirm, are we taking forward as an action to send a letter? Does that need to be agreed, or is that going to happen anyway?
I'd just like to confirm they would like to ask Jack's office just for confirmation once you've got the final figures. Yeah? Thank you very much. We'll just have that circulated via email. Thank you.
Sorry, Chair, that wasn't what I was asking about.
Oh, sorry. I misunderstood.
Sending a letter in support of the Commissioner's lobbying on the fairer funding.
Again, I think that we'll take that as an action for the minutes.
Yeah,
yes, absolutely.
Confirmed.
I apologise, I misunderstood.
No, that's okay.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Put the fire extinguisher in it. Very, very warm. Must have ordinary aircon, could summer. Yeah. Members have an updated version of that included with the agenda pack. Does anybody have any comments, questions, anything else they would like to add? No? Jack, is there anything from your perspective you would like to add?
Yeah, just in relation to the 11th of March meeting, we will include in there the delivery plan.
Yes.
Which is not on there, so we've got the deep dive, but we'll also do the delivery plan, we'll be on the delivery plan, and there against the policing and the crime plan. So that will be an update we will provide on that, and we'll try and cover off some of the points that have been discussed today as well.
Thank you. And I guess, excuse me, I guess it's not unreasonable in the face of the kind of public messages that have gone out this week and all that uncertainty that maybe at each meeting from here on in, not a formal written update, but maybe here's the latest in terms of, you know, the policing reforms and the impact that they're going to have for the panel, for the Commissioner and the Constabulary. We maybe just need to keep abreast of those, don't we?
Yeah, we'll certainly keep you informed. As and when we know.
It's fast moving.
We are working through it. We're working through, obviously, the timeline that's been set, which is clear in the paper around 2028. You know, I've got staff to manage as well.
Of course.
That process. So,
and that's difficult, same as the Constabulary. Yeah.
Exactly which way we're running.
Yeah.
Around that, but we will keep the Commissioner with the Commissioner on that.
Thank you. Are there any, do you imagine there's going to be any opportunities for consultation at a, you know, at a level? It's great when people very high up and very divorced in the situation make decisions, but are there going to be opportunities to come and talk to people on the ground about ideas and things? Probably not.
Yeah, possibly not. The police reform paper is quite clear in essence.
All right, a change done to rather than with. Yeah. Okay.
And ultimately, both ourselves, the Commissioner, and the role of the panel are clearly in there as ending ultimately in May 2028, what that looks like, how that evolves, what information we get. We've got an independent review coming down, which is supposedly starting soon. That's the indications from the white paper, so that might give us more information. It's on our agenda. I've got a member of my team who's currently looking at this and concentrating on what's implicated in that white paper and what it means to us. We will keep you informed.
Okay.
Ultimately, I think through that, then you can give your views.
Yes.
To the panel,
Okay.
Around that.
Okay, and obviously if there's anything we can do to support, please shout. Okay, thank you very much. Does anybody have anything else? No? Thank you very much. Then that. Oh, sorry, Jack.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just looking at beyond the 11th of March, so obviously the veto meeting is now not required on the 16th.
Correct.
The 11th of March. But then when we start to look at the July meeting, which is ahead, and I'm just trying to keep you ahead, obviously we've got the annual report.
Yes.
Which will be presented in that window, and in addition there'll be an annual integrity report that we'll bring in around that time as well. So they're two key.
Ready for July.
So just for your forward planning as well.
Thank you.
And we also, as you'll appreciate, and it's just a little reminder really, we do have a pre-brief
Yes.
ahead of the panel meetings, and I would ask people to attend that because it does allow you to ask questions and influence that. We will be responding on those days, but it'll give you some focus for the papers. So please, come along to those.
Next one I think is, I'm going to do off the top of my head, Wednesday the 12th.
11th.
Wednesday the 11th, 10 o'clock.
Yeah, that's correct. It's that time.
They're very useful.
The Commissioner won't be present, but it just gives you an opportunity to influence what we're talking around key things.
Yeah.
Please.
Thank you very much. And I echo that. Right, thank you very much for your support, ladies and gentlemen. That concludes this afternoon's meeting. Those of you with expenses to claim, if you could do those fairly swiftly and let Pippa have them, please, that would be much appreciated. Thank you very much. Stay safe and see you again in March.